They say if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. A quote that perfectly describes Vasily Blokhin, the deadliest executioner in known human history. Blokhin got his first taste for blood after joining the Red Army during World War I. Over the years, he became the perfect soldier, effective, efficient, and without hesitation. This accelerated his career rapidly, and in 1921, he was recruited into the Soviet secret police organization known as the NKVD. One standout trait on his resume was his ability to remain emotionally numb when carrying out acts of violence. He simply saw it as part of the job. Blokhin's unique skill quickly distinguished him among his peers. If you needed someone dead, Vasily was your guy. His unwavering loyalty pushed him upward, and within 6 years, he was assigned as head of a newly created execution branch of the NKVD by Joseph Stalin himself. Blokhin had become one of Stalin's most trusted workers, executing both low and high-profile targets without question. During his service, Blokhin personally executed thousands of people, including high-ranking Soviet officials during the Great Purge, an internal mass execution of anyone remotely accused of opposing Stalin's rule. Blokhin was spared from the purge due to his repeated proofs of loyalty. His magnum opus was his involvement in the Katyn massacre. If you've never heard of the Katyn massacre, that's not surprising. History classes tend to focus on German war atrocities and skim over the others, especially the Soviet Union's. Despite Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939, officially starting World War II, the Allied powers of Great Britain and France did very little in retaliation. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had also invaded Poland just weeks later, capturing hundreds of thousands of Polish prisoners of war. Many were sent to labor camps. In the spring of 1940, around 22,000 prisoners, Polish officers, engineers, teachers, and other civilians were systematically executed under Blokhin's supervision. Blokhin himself personally executed over 7,000 people in just 28 days. Think about that. 7,000 people in 28 days. That's 250 people a day. Working 10-hour days, that's 25 people an hour. One person every 2 to 3 minutes. And these weren't indirect orders. This was by his own hand. Blokhin had essentially developed an assembly line of death. Prisoners were escorted into a soundproofed room against a sandbag-lined wall. Without a word, their last sensation would be the muzzle of a pistol at the back of their neck. A German pistol, notably, for the sake of plausible deniability. The Katyn massacre is regarded as the largest mass murder conducted by a single person in known human history, a distinction even acknowledged by the Guinness Book of World Records in 2010. It's believed that throughout his career, Blokhin's personal kill count reached into the tens of thousands. His spree came to an end after Stalin's death in 1953. Blokhin was forced into retirement in disgrace, stripped of his military honors during the de-Stalinization of the Soviet Union. He turned to heavy drinking, a habit that eventually led to his death in 1955 at the age of 60. Ante Pavlich. After World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. With some political maneuvering, a new entity was formed, the state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. One of the kingdoms thrown into the mix was Croatia, the birthplace of Ante Pavlich. Pavlich's defining trait was an obsessive love for Croatia. He rose through the ranks as a politician, demanding Croatian independence. But King Alexander I had other ideas. In 1929, after years of political turmoil, the king dismantled all political parties, declared a royal dictatorship, and renamed the nation Yugoslavia. Since Yugoslavia was not Croatia, Pavelić had had enough. He fled and conspired with revolutionary groups to undermine Yugoslav rule, earning himself a death sentence in absentia. He sought asylum in Italy, where he used his political influence to form the Ustaše, a Croatian nationalist movement committed to independence by any means necessary. Bombings, assassinations, and uprisings. On October 9, 1934, King Alexander was assassinated by an Ustaše member using a handgun hidden in a bouquet of flowers. Pavelić and his accomplices were determined to be responsible. France pressured Italy for justice, but thanks to his political connections, Pavelić received only 18 months of house arrest. Then came World War II. After Nazi Germany invaded Yugoslavia in 1941, Pavelić was installed as dictator of a newly independent Croatia. Hitler himself met with Pavelić and offered guidance on ethnic cleansing. Pavelić put that advice to work. He created a network of concentration camps run by the Ustaše, one of which, the Sisak concentration camp, was the only known camp specifically designed for children. These camps carried out the mass murder of nearly 400,000 Serbs, Jews, and Romani people, with an additional 300,000 either exiled or forcibly converted to Catholicism, all in the name of Croatian ethnic homogeneity. Towns were ransacked, villages were destroyed, hundreds of thousands of innocent lives were lost. The atrocities were so extreme that even Nazi General Edmund Glaise von Horstenau described his troops as mute witnesses and stated that the Ustaše had gone raging mad. That's quite a statement coming from a Nazi general. After the Axis powers fell, Pavelić fled, eventually making his way to Argentina in 1948. He continued attempting to organize a Croatian liberation movement from abroad, without success. After an assassination attempt in 1957, he fled to Spain, where he died of his injuries 2 years later. Idi Amin. This is Idi Amin, regarded as one of the cruelest dictators in Ugandan history. He began humbly in 1946, serving as a cook's assistant in the colonial army. But Amin was hungry for advancement, speed running through military promotions, and reaching the rank of captain by 1962. This caught the attention of Ugandan Prime Minister Milton Obote, and a friendship, built in part on ivory and gold smuggling, was formed. In 1966, after being threatened with a parliamentary investigation, Obote seized power for himself, exiling the sitting head of state. He then promoted Amin to commander of the Ugandan army. But Obote proved to be a terrible ruler. His regime was plagued with corruption, terror, and nationwide starvation. When Amin began building up the military for what Obote saw as unnecessary purposes, tensions rose. Obote stripped Amin of his commanding privileges and threatened him with prison for misappropriating military funds. That was a mistake. While Obote was away on government business, Amin launched a coup. The Ugandan people, exhausted from years of suffering, welcomed the change enthusiastically. In 1971, Amin declared that the military would temporarily run the government until new elections could be held. He even promised to free all political prisoners. He never did either of those things. Just 1 week later, Amin declared himself President of Uganda, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Army Chief of Staff, and Chief of Air Staff. With uncontested power, Amin began systematic executions of perceived opponents. Roughly 15,000 civilians disappeared, believed to have been taken to a state-of-the-art torture facility. His target list quickly expanded to artists, journalists, lawyers, students, senior government members, and foreign nationals. There were even credible rumors of cannibalism, though accounts suggest he reportedly found human meat too salty. Human rights organizations estimate that between 300,000 and 500,000 people were killed under Amin's rule. He became known as the Butcher of Africa. He also devastated Uganda's economy, expelling around 80,000 business owners and seizing their property, handing businesses over to his inner circle, who promptly ran them into the ground. These businesses had accounted for roughly 90% of government tax revenue. The financial consequences were catastrophic. As his grip weakened, cabinet members defected, and his military fractured into coups and mutinies. In a disastrous military decision, Amin invaded Tanzania. Tanzania fought back hard. In the end, Amin was deposed and fled into exile, where he reportedly ate up to 40 oranges a day until his death in 2003. Luis Garavito. Our final entry takes us to Colombia. Luis Garavito, nicknamed La Bestia, the Beast, was arrested in 1999 and convicted of murdering 193 children, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. Garavito's crimes began around 1972, when he was just 15. He reportedly suffered from severe depression, psychosis, and paranoia, allegedly stemming from an abusive and traumatic childhood. Combined with crippling alcoholism and an aggressive personality, Garavito began committing violent offenses against children. Disturbed by his own actions, he reportedly attempted to seek help through church, Alcoholics Anonymous, and psychiatrists, genuinely wanting a normal life. But he was never able to escape the darkness he was in. It bears saying, childhood trauma is genuinely tragic. But when that trauma becomes the mechanism by which you create your own victims, sympathy has its limits. By the 1980s, Garavito's impulses had escalated. He claimed they were constant and uncontrollable. He began carrying weapons and escalating his crimes. After each act, he reportedly experienced overwhelming guilt, writing the names of his victims in a notebook and praying for them. By this point, his victim count had already surpassed 100. Searching desperately for answers, he turned to religion, astrology, and the occult. During this period, he reportedly encountered Hitler's autobiography and found disturbing points of identification. He also began idolizing a Colombian serial killer named Pedro Alonso Lopez, who had murdered dozens and received national attention. Attention Garavito wanted for himself. By the 1990s, Garavito had become fully apathetic. No remorse, no sorrow, nothing. Operating in disguise across Colombia, he lured children to secluded areas and committed horrific acts of violence. Victims were buried in mass graves scattered across the countryside, some containing up to 40 bodies. The graves were discovered in 1998, launching an official investigation. Garavito's alcoholism made him sloppy. He frequently left behind clothing, empty bottles, and personal items at crime scenes. He was arrested in 1999 and, under interrogation, confessed to the murders of hundreds of children. His crimes rightfully warranted a sentence of up to 1,853 years and 9 days in prison. However, Colombian law at the time capped sentences at 40 years, and because he had confessed and helped investigators locate remains, his sentence was further reduced to just 22 years. The Colombian public was outraged. Fortunately, In 2021, Garavito's parole was personally denied by the Colombian president, who vowed he would never be freed. He never was. Luis Garavito was diagnosed with eye cancer and died in prison in 2023.